It wasn't fully light yet when the first knock sounded slow, heavy, as if someone was struggling to stay calm. I glanced at the clock. 5 a.m. No one comes to another person's house at that hour, unless it's something important or urgent. I quickly threw on a robe, opened the door and saw Rowan Pierce, the neighbor who lived across the street, the one who'd only ever greeted me with a nod for the past year. But today, his eyes were different, afraid, yet certain. "Beatrix, don't go to work today," he said, his voice hoarse and trembling. "Stay home. And trust me just this once." He placed a black USB drive in my hand, then walked away into the morning mist. The door closed behind him, leaving me standing still in the cold house, wondering what could possibly make someone lose sleep and knock on my door at 5 in the morning like that. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear every beat. The cold blue glow from the computer spilled across the wall, making the small room feel unfamiliar. That notification was still there, cold, emotionless, impossible to erase. Beatrix Hale logged in, Orion Main Lab. I swallowed hard. Maybe it was a system glitch, maybe someone clicked the wrong thing. But the email that followed left no room for doubt. Final sequence activated, Genesis trial. Those words sent a chill down my spine. Genesis trial. I'd heard that name somewhere, during a closed meeting of the Senior Research Division, a place I wasn't authorized to enter. They'd said it was a classified biogenetic project, restricted to top-level experts. I had never been involved. At least, I thought I hadn't. I stepped away from the desk and walked to the window. Outside, the morning sunlight was gentle as always, dew still clinging to the trees, a few neighbors walking their dogs. Everything looked normal to the point of absurdity. But inside me, something had cracked open. I opened the cabinet and pulled out my father's old laptop. He'd used it during his final years. I didn't know why I did it, instinct, maybe. When it powered on, I saw a few encrypted files in his documents folder, the ones he had once forbidden me to open. Then I remembered Rowan's words before he left. "If I'm right, it will save your life." I looked at the black USB on the table. I could find out what he meant, but I hesitated. Logic told me not to. Intuition whispered, "It's time." I plugged the USB into the laptop. The screen flickered, showing a single file. "For Beatrix, if anything happens." I opened it. A video appeared. The lighting was dim, like it had been filmed on a phone in a closed room. As the image cleared, I stopped breathing. It was my father. His face was thin, his graying hair messy, dark circles under his eyes, but his gaze was piercing, alive. He sat at his desk, his voice rough but firm. "Beatrix, if you're watching this, it means what I feared has happened. You can't trust anyone at Orion. No one. If they come for you, leave immediately. You don't understand everything now. But remember this, you weren't chosen. You were created." I stepped back, feeling like my heart was being crushed. Created. What was he talking about? My father was a practical man, never one to speak in riddles. He continued, "The Genesis project isn't meant to save lives, like they claim. It's a weapon, and you're the core of it. Never let them take you. Beatrix." The video ended. The screen went black, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing echoing in the room. I sank into the chair. Gripping the edge of the desk, hundreds of questions crashed through my mind like a storm. Why did my father say that? How did Rowan know? And what was really happening at Orion? I pulled out the USB, hid it in my coat pocket, and ran out the back door. As I crossed the yard, I saw headlights flash at the end of the street. 2 men in black suits were approaching. They were heading straight for my house. I ducked low, followed the fence line, and slipped through Mrs. Mary's garden next door. Her dog's sudden barking made me jump, my heart racing. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "If you want to live, don't go back. North Woodland Road, I'll be waiting." I knew it was Rowan. Somehow, I trusted him instantly. "I know this sounds insane," he said next, "but your father asked me to protect you. If the day Genesis was activated ever came, that day is today." I clenched my hand. "I don't understand. What do they want from me?" "Not just you," he replied. "They want the data inside your blood, the one your father hid. The Genesis project was shut down because he did that." I looked out the window. The scenery was racing by. Everything I had ever known, my neighborhood, my house, my ordinary life, was now just fading in the rearview mirror. I remembered the last time my father called me before he died. He said, "Never forget, Beatrix. Blood has its own memory." Back then, I thought he was talking about genetics. Now, every word echoed in my head like a code. The car sped over a hilly road, sunlight streaming through the windshield. I looked down at my hands, feeling as if every cell was waking up, aware of something approaching, something I had spent my whole life avoiding. Rowan spoke softly. From now on, trust me. No matter how insane things get, one thing remains true: you were never born in the usual way. I turned to ask what he meant, but he tightened his grip on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Inside me, fear and curiosity pulsed like two mismatched heartbeats, both leading to the same question. Who am I really? I stood frozen, phone still in my hand. On the other end, the man's voice came through clearly. The special unit is arriving to escort you to headquarters. Before I could react, there was a knock at the door 3 times, slow and deliberate. A familiar voice followed. Beatrix, it's me. Open up. They're not here to help. I stepped closer, keeping my distance, my voice low. Tell me the truth, Rowan. What's happening? Not over the phone, not through walls. Just trust me this time, he said. I hesitated, then cracked the door open. Rowan stood there, eyes sharp, his coat covered in road dust. He didn't step inside, just said quickly, they're coming, don't let them see you. They faked everything: images, fingerprints, even your car. Someone went to Orion this morning pretending to be you. I shook my head. That's impossible. They said they have evidence. That's why, he said. You have to go now. They're not here to ask questions. They're here to take you. I looked around the house. Everything that had once been familiar suddenly felt foreign. I haven't done anything wrong, Rowan. They don't need you to be wrong. They just need someone to take the blame. Outside, the sound of engines grew closer. Rowan glanced out the window, his voice tense. 3 minutes. Do you have anything important with you? Only the USB you gave me this morning. Good. Keep it with you. That's why they want you silent. He pulled me toward the back door. The cold air cut through my skin as we stepped into the narrow alley behind the house. At the end of the street, headlights flashed. This way, Rowan said, grabbing my wrist and pulling me across the lawn. The smell of exhaust and morning mist mixed in the air. I heard footsteps on the front porch, then the sound of the door being slammed open. Federal Security Division. Open up. I turned my head, beams of flashlight swept across the living room through the window. If they see you, it's over, Rowan said quickly. We slipped through the back fence, wet grass soaking into my shoes. At the small parking lot at the end of the street, a silver SUV waited, engine still running. Rowan opened the door, and I got in. As the car pulled away, I saw in the rearview mirror 2 men in suits entering my house. Guns drawn, one of them spoke into a radio, the light reflecting off his silver hair. I need to know what this is about, Rowan, I said, my voice tight. You will. But not yet. He turned onto a deserted road, eyes fixed on the mirror. They've been planning this for a long time. The explosion was just the opening act. You're the part they can't control. I looked at him, waiting. What do you mean? The part they can't control. You are what they've been studying, Beatrix. That project never stopped, and you're the center of it. I clenched my hands, trying to stay calm. I'm just an analyst. I have nothing to do with genetic research. You don't, but your father did. And he left something inside you, something they could never replicate. I looked out the window. The fields blurred past. The whole world seemed to shrink until there was nothing left but this car speeding down an empty road. Rowan spoke softly, almost to himself. They think he erased all the data, but he hid part of it in your blood. That's why they need you alive, at least until they can extract it. Cold air rushed in through the crack of the window. I didn't know what scared me more, his words, or the fact that I was starting to believe them. Rowan, if all of this is true, why are you helping me? Because your father saved my life, and he believed that one day, you'd need someone to stand on your side just like he once did. Somewhere far ahead, flashes of light reflected off the glass domes of Orion Labs, the place where my old life ended, and the secret I wasn't ready to face waited. Rowan slowed the car, his eyes still forward. From now on, you have to be ready. Everything you thought was random, your job, your father's death, even the house you lived in, it was all part of their plan. I gripped the door handle, forcing my voice to stay steady. You talk like my whole life was an experiment. It's not like an experiment. It is one. I turned to look at him. His eyes weren't threatening, they were the eyes of someone who had seen more than I ever wanted to know. I stayed silent. There were no words left to fight with. It felt like everything familiar, my name, my job. My memories was being peeled away, layer by layer, revealing something else. Something I wasn't sure I wanted to find. Rowan flicked on the blinker and turned onto a narrow dirt road leading into the northern forest. Where are we going? I asked. To the place your father prepared for this exact situation. He looked at me, eyes steady. Beatrix. Trust me. Not everyone gets the chance to find out why they were born. But you're about to. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. The face in the frame was my father's thinner, more tired than in my last memory of him, but his eyes were the same, bright, calm, fully aware that time was running out. His voice was hoarse, as if he'd been speaking for hours before recording this. If you're watching this, it means Genesis has been activated. You're not a witness, Beatrix, you're its core. I clasped my hands tightly. In the background of the video, I recognized his office at Orion, the whiteboard, the filing cabinets, and the glass DNA model he used to keep on his desk. Every detail was so familiar it hurt to look at. His voice came again, slower now, each word carved in steel. They won't stop, no matter where you run, because what they're after is flowing inside you. I didn't look away from the screen. Rowan sat beside me in silence, watching me with a mix of pity and caution. My father, what is he talking about? I asked, my voice almost gone. He shook his head. He didn't trust anyone, not even me. He only said that when the time came, his daughter would understand. The video continued. My father stood up, walking closer to the camera. Under the dim light, I could see every wrinkle around his eyes, details I had never noticed while he was alive. You're not a failed experiment like they believe. You're the result they couldn't reproduce. Your blood carries what they lost. That's why I had to hide you from the program. My heart was pounding. I turned to Rowan. Hide me. What did he do? He transferred the original Genesis data out and deleted every record of you, Rowan said. That's why they couldn't trace you sooner. But now they've recovered part of it enough to restart Genesis. In the video, my father bowed his head slightly, like a man praying. Beatrix, they'll come for you for 2 reasons. To reclaim what they lost, and to silence you. If you surrender, they'll say it's for safety. But the truth is, they want to control how you exist. If you want to know why you were born, find the one called Pierce. He knows where I hid the rest. I turned to Rowan, my voice barely a whisper. Pierce, he means you. He nodded slowly. Yes. He placed his last trust in me, but I never thought the day would come this soon. I looked back at the screen. My father stood still for a few seconds, then spoke his final words, his voice softening. You once asked me why I never told you about my work. I was afraid. Afraid your eyes would change when you found out who you were. But there's no time left. You must live. Not as the person they created, but as the one you choose to become. The video froze there. Inside my head, images collided: my father's hand on my shoulder at graduation, the nights he worked too late to eat, and the photo of us in Orion's lab, where I once believed everything good began. So, what am I, Rowan? An experiment. A replica. No. He said slowly, his eyes locked on mine. You're the only living witness to the truth. Genesis didn't create you, it began because of you. I let out a faint laugh, but it only made the tears fall. It sounds so absurd that even I can't believe it. You don't need to believe it right now, he said quietly. You just need to live long enough to find out for yourself. I stood up and walked toward the window. The street was empty, lit only by the faint glow of streetlights through the fog. The house I once thought of as a refuge now felt like a trap, too quiet, too safe, too unreal. If he knew everything, why didn't he tell me earlier? Why let me live like an ordinary person all this time? Rowan's voice dropped lower. Because he hoped they'd stop. But when he discovered Genesis was still running in secret, he knew one day they'd come for you, and he prepared for that day. I turned back to him. How did he prepare? He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small metal card, and set it on the table. The light caught it, glinting red. This. He gave it to me to keep. Said I could only hand it to you after you'd seen the video. Faint letters were engraved on it. Vault 7B, Rowan access. What does it open? A data vault. The place where your father hid the real Genesis records. If we want to understand what's happening, we have to go there. I stared at the card, fear and determination twisting inside me. Where is it? 2 hours drive from here. But if we go, you have to accept that there's no going back after this. Outside, a distant siren wailed. Rowan glanced toward the window, his expression tense. They've detected a signal. We need to move now. Aiken Day. I took the card and slipped it into my coat pocket. The cold metal against my skin made me sharply aware of everything. Every question, every fear condensed into one thought. If he prepared me for this, maybe I still have a chance. Let's go. Rowan packed up fast, shutting down the laptop and pulling out the USB. He looked at me once more, his eyes steady but worried. Once we leave here, you're no longer Beatrix Hale. They'll track every account, every phone signal. We have to disappear completely. I gave a bitter smile. I used to think I was invisible in this world. Maybe now. I finally am. He opened the door and motioned for me to go first. The air outside was cool. Carrying the scent of damp grass and fuel, Rowan placed a hand gently on my shoulder. He did everything so you could have another life. Don't waste it. I nodded. My heartbeat slowed, but no longer trembled. I knew that, from this moment, I wasn't searching for why anymore. I was beginning a journey to find out who was truly living inside this body and what part of me was worth killing to protect. Rowan started the car. The headlights illuminated a narrow road leading to the highway. I looked at the metal card in my hand, its red reflection flickering like a silent flame. The tires screeched against the wet pavement, tearing through the morning fog. I could hear my own ragged breathing, mixed with the crunch of shoes on gravel. Rowan held my hand tight, pulling me down the narrow path behind the buildings. The cold wind whipped against my face, stinging my eyes. But I didn't dare stop. Every sound behind us made me think they were right at our backs. When we turned into a narrow alley leading to the main street, a car horn blared, sharp and loud. Rowan paused for a second, scanning the area. His voice was low. Quick, they're scanning phone signals. Turn everything off. Remove the battery if you can. I dug through my pocket, my hands shaking. The phone slipped, rolling across the pavement. I picked it up, yanked out the SIM and the battery, and shoved them into my coat pocket. My breathing was still uneven. Rowan, are you sure about everything you're saying? I wish I wasn't, he said, eyes fixed on the street ahead. But if I'd been a few minutes later, you wouldn't be standing here. We circled behind an abandoned store. He opened the back door of a silver SUV waiting there. Get in. I climbed into the seat, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. As the car rolled forward, I looked back through the rear window and saw two black vehicles turning onto the old street. No sirens, no lights, moving in perfect, synchronized precision, like machines. Rowan, who are they? I asked, my voice trembling. The Bureau is just a cover. They're Orion's data retrieval unit. When the project was exposed, their mission became erasing every trace, including people. He spoke slowly, without looking at me. Streetlight shadows slid across his face, highlighting a faint scar near his jawline. The city faded behind us, silent and indifferent. Skyscrapers disappeared into the fog. I felt like I'd just stepped out of my own life, leaving behind everything familiar. My desk, the coworkers who'd texted me good luck with the meeting that morning, and my father's house, which by now might already be full of strangers' footprints. You said my father found something in my blood, I asked, desperate for something to hold on to in the chaos. Rowan glanced at me briefly, just long enough to make my stomach drop. He discovered a rare gene. Your cells can regenerate about 30 times faster than normal human cells. And more importantly, they're immune to most known viruses and toxins. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. If it were fiction, they wouldn't have killed him. The words caught in my throat. I turned toward the window, swallowing the burn that rose behind it. Outside, the sun was weak and pale. The road to the outskirts stretched ahead, eerily calm. Rowan kept speaking, his tone steady like he was reciting something he'd gone over 1,000 times before. When your father discovered that regenerative ability, he reported it to Orion's leadership. They called it a breakthrough in biomedical engineering, but when he realized they wanted to weaponize it, he tried to stop them. You know how that ended? I leaned my head back, eyes closed. Fragments of old memories surfaced: the time I fell off my bike at 16, the deep gash that healed in just 2 days, the time I caught the flu but never ran a fever, only felt tired for half a day. I'd never thought any of it was unusual. Now, every small detail was snapping into place like pieces of a puzzle. I had no idea, I whispered. I just thought I was a little healthier than most people. He wanted you to think that. He hid everything so you could have a normal life. But after he died, parts of the Orion system were restored. They found your old file. And they've been watching me ever since. Every step. Rowan nodded. They let you live, work, believe you were safe, but in reality they were waiting for Genesis to restart so they could use you as the original human template. The car turned off the main road and climbed a low ridge. The trees on both sides rustled in the wind, dry leaves scraping against the windows with a hollow sound. I stared at the horizon and asked quietly, if all they wanted was research, why kill? Because you wouldn't cooperate, and because your father destroyed the original formula. Rowan paused for a moment before continuing. They can copy your genetic code, but they can't recreate its natural source. You're the only original. You make it sound like I'm not human. He met my eyes. I've never believed you weren't. But to them, you're just an asset. I didn't know how much of what he said I should believe, but my instincts told me one thing no matter how impossible it all sounded. The danger was real. A soft beep came from the dashboard. Rowan glanced at the display. The tracking signal's being scanned. We have to switch cars. Where? There's an abandoned gas station a few miles ahead. I've got another vehicle there. He turned sharply, the tires grinding over loose gravel. I gripped the handle, tension spreading through every nerve. We stopped in front of an old warehouse. Sunlight filtered through broken glass, scattering dust in thin beams. Rowan motioned for me to stay in the car, then disappeared inside to check. I tried to catch my breath. The wind drifted through the cracked window, carrying the scent of rust and dry grass. Somewhere in the distance, I could faintly hear the hum of a helicopter. A shiver ran through me as I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. Everything had happened too fast just hours ago. I was a normal woman with a stable job and a steady life. Now, I was running from the very place that built my career. Rowan returned, signaling for me to move into the other car. He started the engine and we drove off quickly, leaving the place behind. They'll find us soon, he said, eyes still fixed on the road ahead. We have to reach Vault 7B before they lock down the system. That's where my father hid the records. Yes. And it's the only place that can prove the truth about you. What if they find us first? Then you'll have to do what he did, erase everything. Rowan glanced at me, his tone eerily calm. And this time, I won't let them touch you. I turned away, unsure whether to feel grateful or terrified by his certainty. The road wound through the forest, sunlight flickering through the trees and dancing across the windshield. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heartbeat gradually steady. Beneath the skin, my blood was still flowing, carrying whatever it was that people were hunting for, and maybe, the answer to everything I wasn't ready to face. Rowan checked his watch, then murmured, "We've got 3 hours before the signal trace resets. From here to Vault 7B is the most critical stretch." I nodded without replying. In my head, my father's voice echoed again from that old video. You weren't created for them to control. You exist to prove that humanity can surpass its own limits. I closed my eyes. Outside, the SUV sped on, slicing through low mountains and drifting fog. The wheels turned steadily, carrying me not only away from the last place I'd called safe, but closer to the truth my father had spent his life hiding. While we hid out, Rowan pulled another USB from his coat pocket. The blue glow of the laptop screen reflected across his face, weary, but razor-focused. He inserted the drive, fingers gliding over the keyboard. A few seconds later, the screen lit up. Lines of text appeared. Project Genesis, subjects B1 through B12. I leaned closer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. When the images loaded, I froze. 12 faces appeared on the screen. 12 people, and every one of them was me. No significant differences. Same nose, same eyes, same small mole near the left cheekbone. Except, their eyes were empty, hollow, staring through the world as if they couldn't actually see it. I couldn't speak. My whole body turned cold. "Rowan, what is this?" He answered quietly, his voice disturbingly composed. "The outcome of the Genesis program, 12 clones created from your genetic structure." I looked at each face, feeling stripped of my own reflection. Every version carried my features, but none of them belonged to me. "Are they real people?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Biologically, yes, but they have no memory, no emotion. They're empty bodies programmed to obey, to exist for the purpose of whoever created them." I stepped back, drawing a sharp breath to steady the dizziness. And this morning, I stopped, afraid to say the rest. "Yes." Rowan nodded. "One of them, subject B3, entered Orion under your name. She used your ID card, your facial scan, everything. Then the explosion happened. I shut my eyes. Each word he spoke cut deeper than the last. So now, the whole world believes I caused it. Not just believes, Rowan said softly. They've issued a nationwide warrant, news channels, social media. Every outlet your face is everywhere under the headline. Bioterrorist from Project Orion. Ache. It felt like standing inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I've become a criminal in my own story. More accurately, Rowan replied quietly. You've become the living evidence they need to legitimize their lie. The screen's light still flickered over the identical faces. There was something in each clone's expression that chilled me, not because it was empty, but because I recognized it. The tilt of the head, the slow blink while thinking. It was like watching myself before I knew fear. Rowan, how many more like them did they make? I'm not sure. The records stop at B12. But fragmented data suggests at least 4 others were transferred overseas. They call it the commercial replication chain. Their goal is to sell regenerative genetics to pharmaceutical corporations and military divisions. I trembled, my voice hoarse. So, I was cloned to be sold. Not only that, they also needed a real face to take the blame for the project's failures. When it all falls apart, they'll claim that Beatrix Hale betrayed them, that you stole the technology and caused the explosion to cover up your crimes. Every piece of evidence has already been fabricated. I went silent, then let out a dry, broken laugh. Perfect. I didn't just lose my father and my freedom. I lost myself. After a moment, Rowan spoke again. Slower, deeper. You haven't lost everything. There's still one thing: they can't touch your memory. And inside it lies the key to ending Genesis. I turned toward him. You know I hate lines like that, right? Like I'm supposed to be the center of the universe. No, Beatrix, he said. You're not the center, you're the beginning. The room fell silent. I could hear the wind slipping through cracks in the wall. Leaves, brushing against the siding outside. Every sensation sharpened the chill on my skin. The metallic scent in the air, the faint hum of the old ceiling fan. I couldn't tell if I was terrified or finally waking up. You said there's another USB, the one with my father's data. I said slowly. What's on it? The original Genesis files, lists of funders, participating scientists, and the data on all 12 subjects. But the most important part is an encrypted code, something your father tied directly to your DNA. You mean, only I can unlock it? Yes. And that's why they haven't killed you. They need you alive, at least until the code is decoded. Everything was happening too fast, too far from the life I once knew. A woman who used to work quietly in a lab, living alone with research reports. Now, the final link in a conspiracy the world didn't even know existed. I looked again at the faces on the screen. 12 people, 12 versions of me, but only one of us could feel fear, could remember a father, could hate the lie that started it all. Rowan, if they find me, I won't let them take me, I said, my voice hardening. He looked at me, concern flickering in his eyes. I knew you'd say that. But, if it comes to it, you have to do what I tell you. Don't hesitate. What are you asking me to do? Erase everything, even if it costs you everything. What are you talking about? If they capture you, they'll trigger Genesis 2.0, the perfected version. Then it won't be 12 copies. It'll be hundreds, thousands. They'll turn your blood into a technology, and you'll stop being human. I shook my head, trying to push the images away. But I couldn't. Rowan shut down the laptop and slipped the USB into his coat pocket. We'll stay here for the night. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to Vault 7B. That's where the answers are. I nodded slightly, though my mind was spinning. When he went outside to check the perimeter, I stayed behind, staring at the small mirror on the wall. A part of me kept wondering, how do I even know that the person in the reflection is me? I reached out, touching the glass. My breath fogged the surface. Through the mist, my reflection blurred until only the eyes remained, the same eyes as those 12 others. But deep inside them, I saw what they didn't have: fear and will. It was late afternoon when we reached the edge of the northern forest. The sunset was fading behind tall trees, leaving only a dim, misty light. Rowan's car stopped at the end of a narrow dirt path blanketed with dry leaves. No signs, no markers, just an unremarkable patch of ground swallowed by dense woods. He cut the engine and looked at me. From here we walk. They can't trace the car, but your biological signal is different. I nodded, tightening my coat. Each step on the damp soil echoed my heartbeat. The cold air crept down my collar, the smell of moss and rotting wood mixing in the wind. The narrow trail led deeper into the forest, winding and darkening with every step. I didn't ask questions, I just followed the beam of Rowan's flashlight. Every time he stopped to listen, my heart froze. Then he turned onto a smaller path, carefully brushing aside ferns. Beneath a layer of leaves, a large iron hatch appeared, half swallowed by dirt. He knelt down, cleared the soil, and pressed a faded metal panel. A soft beep echoed in the silence. "Black Vault," he said softly. "The underground bunker your father built during his suspension from Orion." I looked at the iron door. No handle, no keypad, only a thin crescent-shaped slit at the center. Rowan glanced at me, his voice suddenly firm. "It will only open by recognizing your DNA." He programmed it that way to keep everyone else out. The flashlight beam reflected off the metal surface, revealing fine, vein-like engravings spreading across it. I hesitated, then placed my hand into the slit. A blue light swept across my palm, cold to the bone. For a few seconds, the air around me vibrated faintly. Then the door emitted a heavy mechanical hum. Gears turned deep within, echoing through the ground. Slowly, the massive door split open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into the earth. Rowan turned on his flashlight and said quietly, "Go ahead. You're the only one who can enter." I stepped down, the cold hit instantly metallic, dusty and tinged with ozone. Beneath my feet, the steel steps were damp and slick. The farther we went, the dim light above disappeared completely. Only our footsteps echoed in the hollow space below. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a wide chamber with a low ceiling and rust-stained steel walls. In the center stood rows of filing cabinets stretching all the way to the far wall. Each drawer bore a hand-labeled tag: Genetic Field Study, Human Regeneration Logs, Trial C Sequence. On the desk sat a small lamp and a worn leather notebook, its edges frayed. I recognized the handwriting the instant I saw it, my father's. Strong, deliberate, slanting slightly to the right. I opened it. The scent of old paper and dried ink hit me, dizzying. On the first page, just a few trembling lines were written by hand. "They didn't create you. You are the first natural miracle they tried to replicate. Genesis isn't about life, it's about controlling life." I stopped. My eyes blurred, but I kept reading. "If you are reading this, it means they failed to kill you." Finish what I couldn't free the truth. My father, the quiet man who rarely spoke, had left a final message, not to apologize, but to hand over responsibility. Rowan stood beside me. The light cast shadows across his face, tightening around his eyes. "He knew he wouldn't escape," Rowan said. "But he still chose to leave this for you. He called me a natural miracle. Do you know what that means? Maybe he discovered that your mutation wasn't artificial, that it was a natural evolution. You're proof that what they tried to clone already existed, without human interference." I gripped the notebook tighter. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part burned with anger. All those years of surveillance, manipulation, deceit, all to serve a project for which I was the original template. Rowan quietly opened several filing drawers. He pulled out a folder filled with old lab photos, rows of transparent tanks filled with viscous fluid, each one holding a sleeping female body submerged beneath the gel. I recognized the face. It was mine. "These are from before they moved to mass production," Rowan said. "Each clone survived only a few weeks. They needed the original DNA to maintain stability, and that's why they can't let me die." "Exactly." I held the photo, my throat tightening. Part of me trembled, part of me went completely numb. "Rowan, if my father hid all this data, he must have known they'd find it eventually. He did, and he left a second layer of security triggered only when someone opens the notebook." He pointed to a corner of the desk, where the flickering light revealed a small control panel. On its surface, faint words glowed. "Voice and DNA required for final access," Rowan said softly. "You need to read the last line of the journal aloud. The system will recognize your voice pattern and biological frequency, then unlock your father's private archive." A low hum filled the room. The steel wall behind the filing cabinet split open, revealing a circular chamber glowing faint blue from within. We stepped closer. Inside were hundreds of metal drives arranged in a ring, each labeled Genesis, primary data. On a table in the center sat a small projector and an old crystal display. When Rowan powered it on, a series of short video clips appeared, interlaced with streams of code. I saw my father in one of them, wearing a lab coat, arguing with a man in a suit. His voice was steady, resolute. "You're not studying life, you're learning how to manipulate it." The other man replied coldly, "We're not creating gods, Dr. Hale. We're creating protection for humanity." My father's gaze hardened with disappointment. No. Rowan murmured. He's lying. They never meant to protect anyone. I couldn't look away from the screen. In the final clip, my father turned toward the camera, as if speaking directly to me. Beatrix, if you're watching this, remember the truth isn't in your blood, it's in what you choose to do with it. I reached out to touch the screen. The image dissolved, leaving only the faint blue glow surrounding the room. Rowan, I whispered. He didn't want me to just run. He wanted me to end it. He nodded slightly, eyes fixed on the glowing drives. If this data is released, Genesis will collapse, but if it falls into their hands, the whole world will belong to one project. So, I have to choose, I said quietly. Keep the secret or bring it into the light. He didn't answer. We stood in silence, surrounded by the evidence of a scientific crime. The air was so still I could hear the faint hiss of wind through the vents, carrying the damp scent of the forest above. I looked down at the notebook, the last piece of my father left behind. His handwriting still felt alive. Warm somehow, I knew every word he wrote was both a farewell and an inheritance. Somewhere above us, they were probably closing in. But down here, among his records, I could feel him still guiding me step by step, breath by breath. When we climbed back up from the vault, a monitor in the small security room flickered on. A news broadcast flashed across the screen. Me, handcuffed between two agents, cameras zooming in on a cold, expressionless face. The headline below read, Beatrix Hale, arrested after Orion explosion. A strange feeling washed over me, not panic anymore, but an empty, seething anger. I was still breathing, still standing, still holding my father's notebook, yet out there, the world already had its version of me, complete with face, voice, and guilt. Rowan pulled me away from the screen, his tone flat. That's not you, that's B1, the first clone. They've already written the script. I stared, searching for any difference between the woman on screen and myself, but the resemblance was flawless, too perfect. That was the danger. Rowan opened his laptop, pulling up the few contacts he believed we could trust. An investigative journalist at a small newspaper, an independent biotech security blogger, and a secure overseas server my father had once used to transmit emergency data. We have to move fast, he said. They've released the footage. Spread the story. Once the narrative takes hold, the public will believe it. We need a louder truth, something public, with proof, and we have to do it before their press conference, before B1 appears on national television. The thought of a press conference made me tremble. They'd put B1 on stage, hand her a scripted speech, and the story would be sealed. I was the terrorist. To overturn it, I needed more than words. I needed physical evidence, the original data, the videos, the journal, the images, and I needed to show them to the world in a way they couldn't erase. We worked in deliberate silence. Rowan did what he did best, mapping risks, listing options. I did mine, shaping arguments, controlling my emotions. Every answer he gave opened a new question, and through it all, my memories wove together flashes of childhood. My father bent over his desk, his warning that blood has memory. It all became the fuel for our plan. I could speak out directly, I said, finally. Meet the press, tell everything. But they'll ignore me. They'll say, you're wanted. You're unreliable. Exactly. Rowan agreed. They'll discredit you. We need an independent outlet, something incorruptible, or a video. A data drop from Vault 7B, broadcast simultaneously to multiple points. That way, they can't erase it all at once. He pulled up a small network map on his laptop, pointing to several nodes, independent journalists, secure torrent servers, influential social media accounts. I'll send an anonymous transmission with the files attached. They'll publish within 5 minutes, forcing the press conference to proceed. When B1 appears, we'll play the decoded video. Alongside the original records, most of the audience will see the evidence, not the lie. It made sense on the screen, but reality was messier. To unlock the final layer of data, the system required a combination of my spoken reading of my father's code and a biological input, meaning I had to trigger it myself. Rowan explained that if the broadcast originated from Vault 7B without my activation, the system would reject it. Dr. Hale had built that safeguard to protect the data from the wrong hands, a design that now made our mission both more dangerous and more powerful. So we have to stay in the vault, I said. If I reveal the proof myself, they'll call it fabricated. Maybe. Rowan nodded. But the vault holds what they can't erase: physical records, original samples, offline backups. If we stream directly from there and send mirrored copies to independent servers at the same time, the information will survive. We prepared everything. Rowan contacted the only journalist he trusted through an encrypted channel, sending multiple authentication codes. He uploaded 2 datasets, one containing the copied video files, images, and journals, the other, a large encrypted package that only the vault could decode. The journalist replied with a single message: "Ready. We'll publish the moment we receive it." Meanwhile, I began practicing my voice, reading the final lines my father left behind, with a tone that was clear and restrained. No theatrics, no justification. I knew I had to speak plainly, brief, steady, undeniable, the kind of truth that social media couldn't twist into another lie. The plan solidified. I would appear in a live broadcast from the vault not as a narrator, but as evidence. I would unlock the data, reveal the photos of the bodies in their tanks, the funding documents, the recordings of Orion executives and their partners, the offshore transfers. From now on, it was no longer about running. It was about reclaiming dignity, forcing the world to see the real face of the project. I thought about B1, the image of me on television, and another question surfaced. If they could recreate me biologically, could they also program that copy to confess? Did a replica possess awareness, or was it merely a tool? The question made me tremble, because the answer would decide not only my fate, but the measure of humanity itself. We returned to the car, driving through the thick forest roads toward the vault. As the vehicle turned down the narrow path, Rowan's phone began to vibrate violently. He looked at the screen, his face hardening. A short video had gone live from a major channel, showing B1 reading a pre-written statement claiming she had nothing to do with it. The voice was flat, emotionless. Comment sections were already flooding with outrage. "They've started the media offensive," Rowan said. "We have to move fast." Instead of heading straight back to the vault, we rerouted. If Genesis was going to fall, it had to start at the very heart of Orion, in the basement where it was born. The sound of glass crunching under my boots cracked through the silence. The air was thick with the acrid stench of smoke and burning chemicals, so strong it scorched my lungs with every breath. The Orion basement, once filled with bright lights and the cold ozone hum of machines, was now nothing but wreckage. Charred wires, collapsed screens, red warning lights flickering in uneven rhythms, like the dying heartbeat of a machine at its end. I stepped carefully through the debris-strewn corridor. At the far end, an automatic glass door slid open with a hiss. The central control room still functioned partially, hundreds of monitors, casting a cold blue glow across the steel floor. In the center of the room stood a figure with her back to me. The hair, the shoulders, every subtle motion identical to mine. When she turned, it felt like staring into a mirror from another world. "Beatrix Hale," she said evenly. "They call you the original, but we're far more alike than you think." I stood a few feet away, close enough to see the same eyes, yet empty, eyes that didn't see, only reflected light. "No," I said, my voice steady. "We're not the same. I was born, you were made." She tilted her head slightly. "Do you think that makes a difference? I know every memory of yours, every habit, every reaction. I know what you fear, who you miss, and who made you cry. Tell me, then what's different?" I studied that face. Every movement mirrored mine so precisely it made my stomach twist. But I still saw it, what she didn't have: fear. "That's the difference," I said, placing my hand over my chest. "You don't know fear, I do. And fear is how I know I'm alive." She stepped closer, her tone even and cold. "They built me to replace you. I'm the improved model, no aging, no illness, no emotional instability. You're just the outdated version. Weak, flawed. You should disappear." "No," I said softly, eyes locked on hers. "Because it's those flaws that give me a soul." She blinked, slow as if the processors inside her were trying to compute something they'd never been programmed to understand. Across the room, a series of screens flickered. Rowan was somewhere inside the system, remotely overriding the controls to give me full access. On the main console, 2 commands appeared in bold: Recovery Protocol, surrender and be retrieved. Revelation Protocol, release all Genesis data worldwide. I approached the console cautiously. B1 followed, her eyes glassy but focused. "You won't dare," she whispered. "If you do that, you'll destroy everything, including yourself. Every DNA archive, even your father's data, will be wiped." He knew that. I said quietly. And he still left me this choice. Choice. She gave a strange, small smile. You're naive. No one has a choice. Not even me. I only do what I was programmed to do, and that's exactly why you're not me. She moved suddenly, lightning fast, gripping my wrist before I could reach the keyboard. The strength in her arm wasn't human. Every movement precise, mechanical. They don't need two of us, she said, her voice almost a whisper. And I was made to live in your place. If they gave you life, I said softly, then watch as I take it back with my own hands. I yanked free, slamming my hand into the nearby control pad. A sharp spark shot out enough to make her stagger half a step. In that brief second, I hit the key to open the system interface. On the screen appeared the phrase from my father's notebook. To exist freely, one must dare to lose control. Across from me, B1 steadied herself and lunged forward. But I twisted away, keeping distance. Every move, every breath she took was precise. A perfect reflection of me, without hesitation. You don't understand, she said quickly. Revelation will destroy everything. You'll kill people who don't deserve to die. No, I said, eyes fixed on the screen. I'm saving them from what you call evolution. She laughed, a sound too measured to be human. You'll die with me, Beatrix. And they'll just make another. Maybe, I whispered. But at least this time, they won't be hiding behind my face. I reached for the keyboard. She moved closer, steady, deliberate. The two icons pulsed on the screen. Recovery. Safe, revelation, danger. I closed my eyes and pressed revelation. Every light in the room flashed at once. The monitors flared white. A deep rumble rose from beneath the floor, not an explosion, but the sound of hundreds of systems activating simultaneously. Red alerts spread across the control panels. Data leak initiated. Global transmission active. B1 looked around, the light reflecting in her lifeless eyes. You've destroyed everything, she whispered. Then she faltered. For the briefest instant, her eyes flickered as if something broke through the code. A glimmer of emotion, faint but real. Fear. The first spark of life. Inside the artificial. She stepped back. I didn't know if it was a system error or instinct, but in that blinding white light, she and I, two versions of the same face, stared at each other like mirrors cracking apart. Lines of data erupted across every screen, spreading through the global network, secrets, experiments, records all decoded and sent out. Genesis was no longer a project in the shadows. It was a confession broadcast to the entire world. The heat from the console seared into my palms, the system beginning to overload. But I didn't move. Beatrix, she whispered, calling my name for the first time, her voice trembling. If I'm afraid, does that mean I'm free? I looked at her. In that moment, I didn't see a machine. I saw myself, the version I'd lost to fear long ago. Yes, I said. If you can feel fear, you're alive. The light flared one last time. The ground shook violently. Alarms shrieked through the corridors, echoing with every heartbeat. Red lights strobed across the metal walls, flashing like the last breaths of a dying creature. The smell of burning circuits and molten steel filled the air. I ran, my feet sliding across the slick floor, smeared with blood and water, my hand clutching Rowan's. He was limping, his shirt soaked with blood from a wound on his left shoulder, shrapnel from the blast, but he never let go. Head for the east tunnel, he rasped. They won't have time to seal it. Smoke clouded my vision. Above us, I heard the thrum of Rotor's helicopters circling close. Each time a spotlight swept down, our shadows stretched long against the walls. Two figures, fleeing through the inferno, born from the secrets we had just set free. Beneath my feet, the floor trembled. A deafening explosion thundered from behind, sending clouds of dust into the air. A wave of heat swept past, searing my skin. I crouched low, almost dragging Rowan through a tilted barrier where the flickering sign Exit 04 glowed weakly in the emergency light. Rowan, you're losing too much blood. I'm fine, he gasped, still gripping my hand tightly. Just a few more minutes. We have to get out before the basement collapses. A distant, automated voice echoed through the corridors. Genesis system self-destruct initiated. All personnel evacuate. Emergency code C9 activated. I knew that was their final move to erase every trace, to bury the evidence along with anyone who had dared to uncover the truth. But it was too late. The data had already been released. The world had seen it. and there was no way to pull back the light once it had escaped. We reached the tunnel door. The thick steel panel had partially locked. Rowan pulled the last keycard from his pocket and slid it into the reader. The indicator light blinked, then turned green. The heavy door screeched open, releasing a rush of cold air from the escape route leading toward the mountain slope behind us. He turned back, the red light reflecting in his eyes, making them glow like molten steel. "Beatrix," he said softly, "the world will fear you, but one day, they'll thank you." I wanted to say something, a thank you, a promise that I wouldn't let him die here, but my throat closed up. Amid the thunder of explosions behind us, we plunged into the tunnel. Inside, the air was thin and freezing, the walls were coated in white dust, mixed with smoke. Every footstep echoed, as if someone else were running right behind us. I glanced back and saw the last light in the corridor flicker once, then vanish completely. "Rowan, how much farther?" "About 200 meters. Keep your breathing steady. There's an auxiliary exit ahead." His voice was weakening. I saw drops of dark blood trailing along the floor, forming a winding path behind him. I tightened my grip, half pulling, half supporting him, until the gust of wind from outside hit us cool, damp, carrying the scent of grass and morning dew. When the final steel door burst open, daylight struck my eyes like a blade. The brightness was so sharp, I staggered back a step as if the world itself had reopened after a long dream filled with smoke and blood. Rowan collapsed right at the threshold. I caught him, my hands trembling as I pressed against his wound. "You have to stay awake. We made it out. You have to keep going," he whispered, his lips pale. "If I don't make it, remember, no one must ever recreate Genesis." I shook my head, tears cutting through the soot on my face. "Don't say that. You'll be fine. We'll get out of here together." He gave a faint smile, his weak hand closing around my wrist. "Beatrix, you're not the woman in the lab anymore, don't forget that." The morning wind rose, carrying ashes from afar. I looked around in the distance. Helicopters still circled, but no longer toward us. Maybe they'd lost the signal, or maybe they finally understood. The chase no longer mattered. I helped Rowan along the hillside. The dirt path was damp, covered in moss and fallen leaves. Sunlight filtered through the pines, painting my face with soft golden streaks. Every breath now tasted different, no more smoke or chemicals, only the scent of fresh earth and living grass. I stopped and looked up at the sky. Blue had returned, fragile, but real. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer awareness of being alive. "They created me to control life," I whispered, barely loud enough for myself to hear. "But what they could never create was the will to live." Rowan said nothing, but I caught the look in his eyes, a blend of pride and pain. We stopped beside a large rock overlooking the valley. Far below, faint columns of white smoke still rose from the ruins of Orion. Part of me wanted to go back, to see the end with my own eyes. But another part knew that place no longer belonged to me. I knelt, carefully helping Rowan rest against the rock. His eyes closed, his breathing shallow but steady. "If anyone asks," he murmured, "tell them the truth has been set free." "I'll do more than that," I said, gazing toward the horizon. "I'll live, and I'll tell it in a way they can't distort." He nodded faintly, a ghost of a smile crossing his lips. From a distance, the sound of sirens carried on the wind, faint, but real. The world was moving again, more ordinary, more alive. I placed a hand over my chest. My heartbeat was steady, strong. With every pulse, I felt the blood flowing, the same blood they once tried to claim, once called a sample. But now, it was mine. No one could measure it, analyze it, or program it anymore. Behind me, the sunrise filtered through thin clouds, bathing the distant smoke in a soft golden light. I stood, breathing in the cold, clean air. A chapter had closed. No one knew what awaited beyond this chaos, but I knew one thing for certain. I was alive, in every sense of the word. In the sky, the helicopters were retreating, growing smaller until they vanished behind the mountains. I looked up, squinting against the light. In that moment, I felt myself leaving the darkness too, no longer an object, no longer a programmed being, but a human stepping out of the wreckage, in search of a world where life was defined by choice, not by code. Sometimes, I think every journey begins the moment we dare to say enough, whether to fear, or to what others decide for us. Maybe the world won't remember my name, but somewhere out there, someone will remember this. The truth always finds a way to be seen. And if you're still listening now, Thank you for walking this road with me. Please like, subscribe, and tell me where are you watching from, and what do you believe is the greatest strength in life?